What if history lied about where it truly began? What if Custer's famous last stand wasn't the start of tragedy, but the echo of a story that had already unfolded quietly 8 days earlier in a valley no one remembers? The world called it a battle. The Lakota called it a message. One side marched with orders and pride, the other rode with prophecy and silence. And between them, the land chose its voice. This is the hidden chapter of 1876, when destiny shifted in the dust of the Rosebud, and a man named Crazy Horse proved that even silence can defeat an empire. The battle was over, but the wind had not yet decided what story to tell. All through the valley, this hung like smoke over dying fire. The air trembled with heat and silence, as if the land itself was still holding its breath. The soldiers began to withdraw, their formation broken, their spirit exhausted. What had begun with order and command now ended in confusion. A slow, wounded march south through the dry hills. General George Crook rode in the middle of his column, his gray horse stepping carefully through loose stone and sage. His face, streaked with dust, was drawn tight and hollow. He had believed he was hunting an enemy. Now he realized he had walked into something far older, a storm born from the land itself. His men trudged in silence, boots heavy with mud and sweat. Their mouths were cracked, their canteens nearly dry. The wounded leaned forward on their saddles, eyes glazed from pain and fatigue. The wagons creaked behind them like a funeral procession, wheels grinding against the earth that refused to carry them softly. No bugle call of retreat, no orders were shouted. The wind had replaced the voice of command, whispering through torn flags and broken reins.
We give thanks
above them,
for all
the ridges
our
were lined with
relations.
silent watchers. Lakota and Cheyenne riders sat astride their
Every
ponies,
star you
silhouettes
see
cut
is
against
an
the setting
ancestor.
sun. They did not cheer.
They are
They did not
always
taunt.
with us,
They simply watched.
lighting the
Victory did
path
not need
through the
noise.
darkness.
It had its own sound, the sound of an enemy leaving without pursuit. Crazy Horse sat motionless on a low rise, his face calm, unreadable. He did not smile, nor frown. In his stillness there was gravity, like a stone balanced on water. He raised his hand once, and the line of warriors behind him stopped. The wind carried no shout, no command, only movement. The battle was done. The spirits had spoken. To press further would be to offend them. And Crazy Horse had learned long ago that the land must always have the last word. He dismounted, kneeling on one knee, pressing his palms flat to the soil. The ground still quivered faintly, as though remembering the thunder of hooves and gunfire. It was warm, not from the sun, but from life. He closed his eyes and breathed in the scent of sage and dust. The world, for the first time that day, was quiet again. When he stood, the horizon shimmered gold, the sky bleeding into amber. Smoke curled upward from distant fires, not of battle, but of camp, the people preparing for night. The earth had exhaled. The storm had left, taking the pride of the soldiers with it. That night, the valley glowed with small fires scattered across the ridges like fallen stars. The Lakota and Cheyenne sat in silence, listening to the heartbeat of the drums fading to a gentle pulse. Children fetched water from the river. Women tended the wounded, their hands moving with the quiet skill of generations. The warriors sat in circles, their faces half lit by flame, eyes reflecting something deeper than victory. No one boasted, no one laughed. In the flicker of firelight, they felt the weight of what had been restored, not glory, but balance. Crazy Horse sat near the stream, washing his hands in the water, watching as ripples spread outward and dissolved. His reflection flickered with each wave, half shadow, half sky. He thought of his vision, the promise given to him in youth, that no bullet would harm him so long as he fought with humility, without vanity, without taking what was not his. Tonight, the promise had held true, but he knew humility was a harder enemy than any soldier. Across the river, Sitting Bull lit a pipe of red stone and lifted it toward the stars. The smoke drifted upward, vanishing into the night sky like a prayer carried by wind. He had seen this moment before, in the vision of soldiers falling like grasshoppers, their weapons scattered, their horses running free. It had come to pass. though not as the people imagined. The victory had been quiet, unseen by history's eye, but it was real. The plains had spoken. The prophecy had begun to breathe. Sitting Bull exhaled slowly, his gaze resting on the glowing horizon. He knew the dream was not finished. Prophecies rarely end in comfort. They unfold in waves, and the next wave was already rising. When dawn returned, it came softly, pale, silver, silent. Mist hovered over the stream, erasing the scars of hoof prints and footprints. The valley looked as if nothing had happened, yet everything had changed. The land had absorbed the memory, turning pain into patience. From the west, riders appeared, messengers carrying word of Crook's retreat. Their horses foamed at the mouth, their faces streaked with dust and pride. Smoke signals spiraled into the morning sky, curling above the plains to tell the allied tribes what had happened. The soldiers had come, and they had gone. The gray fox of the north had lost his scent. The news spread with the wind, carried across the valleys to every camp. Arapaho, Hunkpapa, Oglala, Cheyenne. Drums answered drums in the distance, each one echoing the same rhythm. The land still lived. For the first time in many seasons, the people felt unity not built from fear, but from faith. Elders said it was Wakantak's mercy, the Great Spirit giving his children time to gather strength before the greater storm. Young men said it was proof that the white soldiers could be turned back. But Crazy Horse said nothing. He sat on his horse, watching the smoke drift and fade, his thoughts like shadows moving across stone. He rode along the ridge, tracing the path where the soldiers had retreated. The ground was scarred with hoof prints and broken gear, signs of panic scattered among sage and rock. He dismounted, knelt, and brushed his hand over the tracks. Then he stood again, gazing west, where the mountains waited beyond the haze. His silence was not emptiness, it was listening. By midday, the camp began to move. The Lakota and Cheyenne packed their belongings, lashed hides to travois, and herded their horses. The drums kept time with their movement, a slow rhythm that matched the pulse of the earth. They would not stay here. The Rosebud had spoken its message. It was time to carry it onward. Before they departed, Crazy Horse gathered the warriors who had fought beside him. They stood in a half circle on a small ridge overlooking the valley, the wind bending their feathers and hair. The soldiers have gone, he said quietly. The land is quiet again. But the wind tells me this is not the last time we will hear their hooves. He paused, eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The man with yellow hair is coming. The warriors looked west, following his gaze. They saw only sunlight and distance, but the wind carried something new. A low tremor beneath the grass, the faint hum of prophecy. The elders began to pray. The women tightened their bundles, and slowly, like water flowing toward a river, the camp began to move across the valley. The sound of drums followed, not of war, but of remembrance. Each beat was a word, each pause a breath of gratitude. The people sang softly as they rode, their voices blending with the rhythm of who's and when. It was not a song of triumph. It was a song of balance, of returning to harmony after the world had tilted. The soldiers, far to the south, continued their weary retreat. Their campfires burned low and small. Men sat in silence, eyes hollow, the echo of defeat heavy in their chests. Some cursed the terrain, others the scouts, still others the luck that had turned against them. Crook said little. He stared at the embers of his fire, knowing what he could not admit aloud, that this campaign, meant to bring control to the frontier, had instead awakened something uncontrollable. He could not know that his retreat had opened the path for Custer's advance, that his failure would echo louder than any of his victories. The reports he would later write would call it a strategic withdrawal. History would call it indecision, but the land would call it balance restored. As the Lakota moved westward, the plains began to change. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, the air thick with the smell of rain. In the distance, lightning flared, not fierce, but illuminating, as if the heavens were painting paths in light. Crazy Horse rode at the front, his horse breathing hard, its mane slick with sweat. Behind him, hundreds followed, families, elders, warriors, moving together like a single living tide. They stopped by a river at dusk. The water ran red with the reflection of sunset, not blood, but beauty. Crazy Horse dismounted, crouched, and cupped the water in his hands. He drank, then let it flow back through his fingers. He whispered to the stream, "You have seen it. You will see it again." The wind answered softly, bending the reeds. Far above, a hawk circled, the same hawk that had watched the morning before the battle. It wheeled once, twice, then drifted toward the west, where the mountains caught the last of the sun. Crazy Horse mounted again. He looked once more toward the valley behind him, the Rosebud, quiet now, its memory sealed in dust and grass. Then he turned west. The road ahead was not written, but it was waiting. The spirits had tested his heart and found it steady. Now they would test the world. The wind rose, carrying the scent of sage and rain. Behind him, the people followed, and in their wake, the plains whispered a sound that would grow into legend. 8 days later, another dawn would come, another river, another valley, another prophecy fulfilled. The man with yellow hair would ride into that silence, believing himself unstoppable. But he would find only what Crook had found, that some wars are not fought between armies, but between arrogance and the truth of the land. The Rosebud had been the whisper, the little Bighorn would be the roar, and in between them stood Crazy Horse, the man who never shouted, the spirit who let the wind speak for him. June 17, 1876, the day the plains drew breath and held it, waiting for destiny.